It was a chilly morning in Jerusalem, and the city was still draped in a blanket of darkness. The faint glow of streetlights pierced through the mist, casting long shadows on the cobblestone streets. As the first rays of sunlight peeked over the horizon, they revealed the bustling city coming to life. Merchants set up their stalls, children laughed and played, and the scent of freshly baked bread wafted through the air. Amidst the hustle and bustle, a small group of people gathered in a quiet corner to study the scriptures and pray. They were followers of Jesus, seeking to understand the signs of the times as he had instructed them. Among the group was an elderly man named Benjamin, a devoted believer who had witnessed the events in Ukraine and Turkey with great concern. He couldn't help but think about the prophecies that Jesus had spoken of during his time on earth, and he wondered if they were beginning to unfold before his very eyes. One day, while he was deep in thought, a young man named Elijah approached him. Elijah was a bright, inquisitive soul who had been searching for answers to the questions that plagued his mind. He had heard of Benjamin's wisdom and sought his guidance in understanding the significance of the recent events. "Benjamin," he asked, "do you believe that the war in Ukraine and the earthquakes in Turkey are part of the signs Jesus spoke of before his death? Are we living in the end times?" The old man looked at him thoughtfully, and after a moment of silence, he began to share a story. It was a story of a time long ago when the people of Israel were divided and faced great turmoil. The Romans had occupied their land, and many were filled with resentment and anger. There were those, like the Pharisees and Sadducees, who believed that they held the key to understanding God's will, and they used their knowledge to maintain control over the people. They focused on the letter of the law rather than its spirit, often missing the true message of God's love and mercy. Yet amidst this darkness, there were others who saw the light. They were the ones who sought to understand the signs of the times and remained faithful to God's promises. They recognized Jesus as the Messiah and followed him, even in the face of persecution and death. As Benjamin shared this story, Elijah listened intently. He began to see parallels between the events of the past and the world in which they now lived. The religious deception that Jesus had warned of was becoming more prevalent, and the war in Ukraine and earthquakes in Turkey seemed to align with the signs Jesus had spoken of. "But how do we know for sure?" Elijah asked, still seeking clarity. Benjamin smiled gently and said, "We cannot predict the exact timing of these events, but we can be watchful and prepared. We must stand firm in our faith and trust in God's promises. As Jesus said, 'You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed.' Such things must happen, but the end is still to come." The words resonated with Elijah, and he began to understand the importance of staying vigilant and faithful, even in the face of uncertainty. Years passed, and the world continued to change. The conflict in Ukraine grew more intense, and natural disasters continued to devastate communities around the globe. But as these events unfolded, the small group of believers in Jerusalem grew stronger in their faith. They remained committed to studying the scriptures, praying, and supporting one another through difficult times. As an older man, Elijah often reflected on his conversation with Benjamin and the lessons he had learned about the signs of the times. He recognized the importance of remaining grounded in faith and trusting in God's plan, even when the world seemed to be spiraling out of control. Elijah had since become a leader within the community, guiding others in their spiritual journeys and helping them understand the significance of current events through the lens of Scripture. He often shared the story of his conversation with Benjamin, passing on the wisdom and insight he had gained. One day, a young woman named Ruth approached Elijah with a heavy heart. She had recently lost her father in the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and struggled to make sense of the suffering and destruction she saw around her. "Where is God in all of this?" she asked, tears brimming in her eyes. Elijah looked at her with compassion and gently responded, "God is with us in our suffering, just as he was with Jesus on the cross. He weeps with us and longs to comfort us in our pain. But we must remember that this world is not our final destination, and God has a greater plan for us beyond our understanding." Ruth listened as Elijah recounted the story of Benjamin and the lessons he had learned about the signs of the times. He reminded her that Jesus had warned of wars, earthquakes, and other disasters, but he had also encouraged his followers not to be alarmed. Instead, they were to remain steadfast in their faith, trusting that God would bring them through the trials they faced. As Ruth considered these words, she found a glimmer of hope amidst her grief. She began to see that, even in the darkest of times, God's love and presence could still be found. With renewed strength, Ruth dedicated herself to her faith and joined the community of believers in Jerusalem. Together, they continued to study the scriptures, pray, and serve one another as they navigated the challenges of their world. In the years that followed, the group witnessed many more trials and tribulations. The war in Ukraine persisted, and the aftershocks of the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria continued to reverberate throughout the region. But through it all, they held fast to their faith and found solace in the words of Jesus, who had promised that the end was still to come. As the community grew and new generations emerged, the stories of Benjamin, Elijah, and Ruth were passed down, serving as a testament to the enduring power of faith in the face of adversity. The believers continued to look to the signs of the times as a reminder that God's plan was unfolding according to his divine timeline. As the sun set over Jerusalem one evening, casting a warm glow on the ancient city, a sense of peace washed over the community of believers. They knew that, despite the trials they faced, their faith in God's plan would guide them through the uncertainty of the world. Together, they stood as a beacon of hope and a testament to the power of trusting in God's promises, even in the darkest of times. And so, the story of the believers in Jerusalem serves as a reminder to us all that no matter the challenges we face, our faith in God's plan can provide the strength and courage we need to persevere. With unwavering trust in his promises, we can navigate the signs of the times and find hope amidst the chaos and turmoil of our world. The events of the war in Ukraine and the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria have led some to question whether they are part of the signs Jesus spoke of before his death on the Mount of Olives, when he spoke to his disciples. Jesus responded to their question of, "When will these things happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" By first citing religious deception as a sign, stating, "For many will come in my name, claiming, 'I am the Messiah,' and will deceive many." Mark 13:6. So, the religious deception comes first. This is happening today on a large scale. It is no longer Christ alone, as Peter testified before the Sanhedrin, Acts 4:12. Further, the watering down of the Christian testimony no longer just comes from outside, but also from within Christianity itself. People are adapting to the world's views and don't want to offend anyone. As the second sign, Jesus mentioned war. When we see the current war in Ukraine, it becomes clear that this conflict between Russia and Ukraine can indeed take on apocalyptic proportions if a solution is not found. The third sign mentioned by Jesus is earthquakes. According to Luke 21:11, the Lord didn't just mean ordinary earthquakes, but great earthquakes. The earthquake in Turkey was undoubtedly a major one. This devastating disaster took place not too far from Israel. The quakes were felt in a part of the country. In Israel, there has long been talk of a coming major earthquake. Experts believe that the many quakes that have occurred fairly close to Israel could potentially trigger that big earthquake. But, as we all know, no one can predict the time. For those of us who believe in Jesus, his words in Matthew 24:6 provide hope and comfort, where he says, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come." Jesus gave these signs so that we can orient ourselves to the trends of this world. He rebuked the Pharisees and Sadducees because they failed to recognize and understand the signs of the times, saying to them, "When evening comes, you say, 'It will be fair weather, for the sky is red,' and in the morning, 'Today it will be stormy, for the sky is red and overcast.' You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times." Matthew 16:2-3. For the Jews, the rebellion against Rome ended in disaster because they overestimated their own power and underestimated that of Rome. The moderate elite wanted to negotiate with Rome, but the extremists staunchly opposed this. It is always wise to learn from history. For Israel now, it is not a simple matter of how they should position themselves in the war between Russia and Ukraine. President Zelensky has been asking Israel for arms supplies for a long time, but Israel has wisely stayed out of the conflict thus far. The country is in a sensitive position. In the recent past, Israel, and especially Benjamin Netanyahu, has maintained good relations with Russia, which is crucial for dealing with the Iranians in Syria. Therefore, Israel needs a lot of wisdom to decide how to cope with the current situation. Based on the Bible, we know that Israel has yet to go through tough times, but God will support his people in a special way.